All right, let's get right into it. The title for this analysis, The Mind Has No Firewall. It comes from this really chilling military paper from 1998. And the idea behind it is, well, it's pretty simple, but it's also kind of scary. While we've been so busy building digital walls to protect our machines, we've left the most important computer of all completely undefended, the human mind.
And that quote really sets the stage, doesn't it? This isn't science fiction. We're talking late 90s. And military strategists were already dead set on the idea that a new kind of arms race was coming. But these new weapons, they wouldn't be aimed at cities or armies. Nope. They'd be aimed right at the individual person. The stakes were just incredibly high.
So, to really understand this new battlefield, you have to start with this one core idea. It's an analogy that kind of reframes how we think about ourselves. For just a minute, forget biology, and start thinking of your body as a really complex and, yeah, very hackable computer. And you know, this comparison is surprisingly literal. It's not just about your brain being a CPU. Think about the tiny little hair cells in your inner ear processing sound, or the retina in your eye processing light. Those are all biological data processors. They're constantly taking in signals from the outside world. And just like any processor, they can be manipulated, they can be overwhelmed, they can even be crashed. And look, this isn't just some theory. We've actually seen it happen, completely by accident. You might remember that crazy incident in Japan. A popular kids' cartoon used this sequence of flashing, pulsating lights, and it sent hundreds of children into seizures. Now, that wasn't an attack, of course, but it was a perfect, terrifying demonstration of the principle. The right sensory input can physically hijack your body's systems. Okay, so if this vulnerability is real, how was the world's most advanced military thinking about this new kind of war? Well, the official U.S. doctrine back in the 1990s was focused almost completely on the hardware. On the surface, the official definition from the Department of Defense sounds pretty broad. It talks about information operations, specific objectives. It's standard military jargon, right? Clean, precise. But the real key to understanding the American approach is looking at how they defined the battlefield itself. And right here, the focus becomes crystal clear. When the U.S. military said information systems, they meant computers, satellites, software, communication gear. The human was there, yeah, but only as a highly trained individual who used the system. The system itself, the hardware, that was the thing to be attacked or defended. So here's the bottom line. The entire U.S. strategy was about protecting and attacking boxes. It was all about getting data from one computer to another, or stopping your enemy from doing the same. The only time the human mind was really considered a target was under that very old-school traditional category of psychological operations, or PSYOP. You know, propaganda leaflets, radio broadcasts, that kind of thing. But this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. Because while the U.S. was focused on building firewalls for computers, a completely different and frankly much weirder doctrine was taking shape in Russia. They weren't looking at cyberspace. They were looking at brain space. This quote from the Russian military press back then says everything. Humanity stands on the brink of a psychotronic war. I mean, wow, this isn't about ones and zeros anymore. A psychotronic war means the battlefield isn't a physical place or a digital network. The battlefield is consciousness itself. At the core of this was a totally different way of looking at a human being. Instead of seeing us as self-contained organisms, Russian theorists saw man as an open system, one that's constantly interacting with the environment. What that means is that external energy, sound waves, electromagnetic fields, whatever, aren't just things we experience. They're inputs that can directly change our mental and physical state. We're permeable. I mean, the difference here is just night and day. For the US, the main target was the machine, the computer, the satellite, the network. But for these Russian thinkers, the main target was the operator, their mind, their body, their very ability to understand reality. It's a massive shift from attacking the technology to attacking the person using it. And this new way of thinking didn't just stay on paper. It led to them dreaming up an entirely new kind of arsenal. Weapons designed not for physical destruction, but for what one writer called psycho-terrorism. And the list of these conceptual weapons is just wild. It's like something out of a pulp sci-fi novel. We're talking about generators that could send debilitating signals through a city's plumbing or its power lines. Weapons designed to paralyze an organism's central nervous system. Ultrasound devices that could cause internal injuries without leaving a single mark.
It was a terrifying new way to think about war. One of the most famous of these techniques was the 25th frame effect. The idea is pretty simple. You flash a message or a picture for just a single frame of video. It's too vast for your conscious mind to see, but the theory is your subconscious picks it up. Whether the goal is to sell you something or implant a command, it's all about bypassing your rational brain.
And the research went even further into areas that, most people in the West would consider fringe science or maybe even paranormal. But it was being taken seriously over there. They were looking into telepathy for secret communication, telekinesis for messing with enemy equipment, and even psychokinesis, directly interfering with an enemy commander's thoughts.
Now, to be fair, the U.S. was also developing some of its own wonder weapons. There was research into acoustic devices that could make people incredibly sick to their stomachs and microwaves that could heat someone's body from far away. But here's the crucial difference. It was all about the doctrine. The U.S. saw these as non-lethal tools for things like crowd control, not as weapons in some grand psychotronic war. So what does this all boil down to? It brings us right back to the central warning of that 1998 paper. By focusing so much on protecting the machine, the West had created this huge, undefended hole in its security.
And you want to know how seriously this threat was taken? According to reports at the time, Russia's own strategic rocket forces, we're talking about the people with their fingers on the nuclear button, they actually started implementing anti-ESP training. They were actively trying to teach their most important people how to resist these weird psychic-style attacks. And the goal, stated in language that sounds eerily familiar today, was to build a firewall around the heads of the operators. So while one side was building firewalls with code for computers, the other was trying to build firewalls out of mental and psychological defense.
And this is the absolute core of the entire analysis. This obsession with perfecting technology created a massive blind spot. In any advanced system, the most complex, the most unpredictable, and the most easily manipulated part isn't the hardware or the software, it's the human being who's running it.
Just think through the logic here. You spend billions of dollars developing the most secure technology in the world. You train elite operators to use it, but then you pour all of your defensive money and effort into protecting the machine, leaving the mind of that operator as a wide-open, completely undefended target. It's like building the world's strongest castle and then leaving the front gate wide open.
And that leaves us with a question that honestly feels even more urgent today than it did back in 1998. In our world where we are just constantly bombarded with information, disinformation, and algorithms all designed to influence how we think, who is building the firewall for the mind?